Let's meet tonight's party panel. It's a good one. We've got attorney. She's a contributor at The Federalist and also IWF senior policy analyst. Inez Stepman is back. And look who's here, host of the No Mickey Show, former Bernie Sanders campaign surrogate, No Mickey Const in the house, and comedian and host of Part of the Problem. That's a podcast. He's the one and only Dave Smith. The audiences love him. The old ladies throw their panties, and we're just happy he's here.
A married man.
I know, that's why you're a decent human, and they love you more for it.
I throw him right back.
So, Naomi, let's talk a little bit about Bernie, because he's getting torched by the media, other Democrats, and Michael Bloomberg. And it's not just that his supporters are going to be upset. If they really railroad him out of this nomination, what do you think will happen to the Democrat Party?
It will not exist.
I agree with you completely.
And as a result, the Republicans won't exist because they kind of work off of each other.
Yeah.
We'll just be like one giant independent mess or an oligarchy, which is, I mean, it's becoming even more. The only person who has a path to the nomination that's not Bernie Sanders right now is Michael Bloomberg. Mm-hmm. You have to have enough money to get through Super Tuesday, to expensive states like Texas and California, and you have to have the ground power, the organization.
He's just buying
on
the ground power.
And he's buying the ground
power.
power.
People 3 times what they'd make on other campaigns. Other campaigns, if they do have the resources, aren't able to hire people in upcoming states.
Well, they don't have the resources. The only person who has the resources is Bernie Sanders. So this is the real problem here. Pete Buttigieg doesn't have those resources. He definitely doesn't have the coalition behind him. He's going to face real obstacles in states with like people of color, which he pulls at 0 with right now.
We don't know that. I mean, that's one of the talking points that people use to dismiss Pete Buttigieg, but I think he still could very much be a contender here. My problem is with the Chuck Todds of the world. When they dismiss Bernie Sanders going, who would call this guy a front runner? And it's like, well, he's actually polling #1 in several national polls. Right. He came in a very close second in Iowa. He barely squeaked out a win in New Hampshire, but he did win, and he is fundraising like crazy. So why is the establishment media so quick to dismiss him?
Look, if Joe Biden was in exactly the same position as Bernie Sanders today, not only would the media be calling him a frontrunner, they would be calling him the presumptive nominee.
Yeah, good point.
And so there's no other reason for the Chuck Todds of the world not to talk about Bernie Sanders as a frontrunner. He simply is, and I agree, we were talking about this before, that this is very similar to what happened to Ron Paul. It's very similar to, clearly, the two main parties have had a certain boundaries around conversations in politics for the last 30 years.
Look at the presidential debates,
and the country
and
doesn't want that anymore.
Well, and of course, and Donald Trump, I mean, is the other obvious comparison. Now, I'm not a big fan of a lot of Bernie Sanders' policies. I'm not a big fan of a lot of Donald Trump's policies. But it's pretty transparent at this point for the country to see that the position of the corporate press is we determine who the nominees are. And if you're outside of who we decided is an acceptable choice, then you're not allowed in. And it doesn't really matter what the voters want.
Okay, so Bloomberg is not only a politician, he's not only a billionaire, he controls a huge chunk of media in this country. So if this were a Republican, and he used to be a Republican, I think that Democrats would be up in arms. So are they tolerating the idea of a Bloomberg presidency because they've got their hands out for future contributions?
They're not only tolerating the idea, the Democratic establishment is praying for a Bloomberg presidency, and that shows you how much Bernie Sanders scares them. And it's like the Democratic establishment has kind of figured out this formula where if you throw like some woke red meat at the base, you don't actually have to give them any of the economic policies that they want. So no threat to big corporate domination of the economy, but they just say like, oh, we're going to have more people of color, or they bash white privilege or something like that. And all of a sudden
you have these left-wingers. Don't actually do anything about it.
Well, yeah, and then you have these left-wing 20-year-olds feeling like J.P. Morgan Chase is really woke or something like that. And Bernie Sanders is actually an old school, socialist-leaning, whatever he calls himself, democratic socialist, who's like actually concerned about the economic issues, and this scares them.
He's also the only person who's standing up to Bloomberg because Bernie's not going to run again. He doesn't have anything to lose here. Do you think he'll go third party if they do railroad him out of the nomination?
I don't think so.
He should go third party, Bernie. Announce it here.
Sure. I mean, Bloomberg could do that if he wanted to as well. The problem with Bernie is that it's just a logistical nightmare. It's too difficult. He would be a spoiler for whoever. I mean, for Bloomberg.
Exactly. You don't really know who
Trump.
he'd be a spoiler for.
And that's the problem with Bloomberg, is Bloomberg would end up being the spoiler against Bernie, which he's doing right now. Let's just be very clear. Every Democrat in this race, and Michael Bloomberg, who is a Republican, is a spoiler right now for beating Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders is beating Donald Trump right now by double digits. He's ahead of Joe Biden by double digits. He has the infrastructure to beat Donald Trump's infrastructure. These people who are clinging to their 15th houses, these consultants who are sucking money away from Democratic activists and voters, and look at Michael Bloomberg as a solution so that they can pretend that they're woke. You are so spot on about that. These are not Democrats. These are Republicans who want to make money but seem really hip and cool. The real Democrats are the ones that supported the unions, that supported workers, that understand that students are struggling with their debt.
You can still support workers and make money. I mean, Bernie's trying to have
No,
that
you're right. You're right. You're 100%.
Nothing wrong with being successful. Unlike Joe Biden. Oh, poor sleepy Joe. He's still campaigning like he's the woke front runner, which at this point he most certainly is neither. And as you know, he just got smoked in both Iowa and New Hampshire. Up next, Nevada and South Carolina, and then Super Tuesday, which has like 94 states involved. We've done the number crunching here. Very accurate. Politico obtained a recording of a 13-minute phone call that Biden had with his increasingly nervous supporters, and in it, he still seems pretty confident despite the writing on the wall. We're told Biden said the race is still wide open and went on to say that he was, quote, confident we can win South Carolina. I think we'll win Nevada, but it is a caucus, which is a little bit different, and I'm in Nevada. No, Joe, you're not, honey. Oh, I hate to break it to you. Neither of those contests are in the bag, buddy. You're running out of funds, you're losing black voters, and your staff is reportedly freaking out. Your donors are fleeing. Today on The View, the ladies pushed him on those exact things, but old Joe is still defiant. Watch.
I believe I'm going to beat Trump. I believe I'm the person who gets the nomination. 99% of the African American vote hadn't voted yet.
Yeah.
99% of the Hispanic vote hadn't voted yet. This is the tactic he uses. The best thing when you're attacked, go to somebody else. Take your eye off the ball. Focus on something else. And I'll be damned if I'm going to give him that opportunity. I can hardly wait to get him on a debate stage. I can
hardly wait. What? All right, does the former VP still have a little gas left in the tank? He looks very energized. Or should he just park the Oldsmobile and take the Amtrak back to Delaware? What do you think, Inez?
I definitely think he should take that Amtrak back. When you were talking about him being woke, were you talking, sort of SJW woke or actually literally awake?
Because that's the nice thing about using that phrase is there you can use it interchangeably.
No, but Joe Biden came into the primaries, let's say before there was a single vote cast. He looked maybe like Romney in 2012, somebody that the base of the party didn't really like. They were going to give everybody else a turn in the hot seat and then ultimately reject
That's
each other
right.
candidates.
And the thinking was if we could just get him past the primaries, we'll be fine.
But now he looks a lot more like Jeb Bush in 2016.
Fortune's also faded in.
The candidate who
South
the political
Carolina.
class thought was a great idea that the base completely rejects, who's completely out of step with where the Democratic base is. So he might as well just add an exclamation point to Joe.
So the thing about Joe is I do think that he's likable. I do think he means well. I do think that he's a patriotic person. I think he loves his country. He loves his family. And all of that shines through. Having said that, he's not a good candidate. He's making gaffe after gaffe. He makes so many mistakes when he talks to people one-on-one or when he's in front of an audience. And it's kind of sad to see his career fizzle out like this. And for that, I feel bad for him. And the worst thing you can have for another human, I think, is pity.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I've predicted for since he got into the race that he was going to collapse. I've said it on this show several times. I was shocked that it took this long, that it took this long for him to collapse, and it's at the worst possible time.
How does he get out?
For him? He gets out by underperforming in South Carolina, and then it's all over.
Is that it?
After that, that would be my guess. Joe Biden has nothing to offer the current Democratic base. And I've seen this from the very beginning. His whole pitch revolves around, I was Obama's guy.
Yes.
And he's not even going in with Obama's endorsement, which would be absolutely necessary to effectively make that pitch. And the truth is that there is this underlying message that the Democrats have that Obama was a failure. And they don't want to come out and say that because they all really like Obama personally.
Yes,
but the truth is,
if Obama's, like they like Joe Biden
look,
personally.
if Obama's signature issue is Obamacare, and then the Republicans fail to repeal Obamacare, and then your number one issue in the next presidential election is we need to overhaul health care.
Yes.
What do you call that last administration? It's a failure.
Yes.
He was at war every single day of his administration. The income inequality grew larger than it ever has in modern American history. By no progressive metric was Obama successful.
No, and
now
it
you
was
just
a
have
very stagnant economy.
That's right, and
that sputtered into a half recovery.
despite record high government spending and record low interest rates, it was still a slow recovery. And as Bernie Sanders will point out, he's like, this wasn't a real recovery. He'll go short of indicting Obama, but that's the underlying reality.
Speaking of an indictment, James Clyburn in South Carolina, who's part of House Democratic leadership, incredibly influential not only in the Democratic caucus but also in the state of South Carolina, he won't endorse anyone.
Right.
And Joe Biden desperately needs that endorsement. If he doesn't have the president's endorsement, that would certainly help him. What does that say to you?
Well, it's interesting because in 2016, you may recall, James Clyburn said he held off his endorsement for a bit, and of course he endorsed Hillary Clinton in the end, but he said that his own family, his grandson, said that he was supporting Bernie Sanders, and that caused him to pause and reflect. Of course, he ended up going with the establishment in the end, and he might do that again. But you're seeing a generational shift that the younger generation of black voters is influencing their parents and grandparents. And so you're starting to see those numbers. They're taking them to rallies with them. They're listening to Bernie Sanders.
So why doesn't that bear out in the polling?
It is, actually. Bernie Sanders has the most support when it comes to people of color as a whole, Latinos and African Americans, and he comes in second, just below Joe Biden. So Bernie Sanders has been able to make up a lot of...
Mike Bloomberg's in second with African American voters in South Carolina, at least before the tape.
Right. Well, that too. Before the tape. The last week...
Don't you think that reveals that he really is racist at heart?
Without a doubt. I mean, if you listen to any of these tapes and if you see Michael Bloomberg's record, the problem is that he hasn't been tested. He's just starting to campaign now. Mm-hmm. So he's just starting to get
no one's really pushed him on some of these critical issues because he says, I cut it back 95%. It's like, yeah, but you raised up in Frisk 120% from when you took office. So that's kind of a disingenuous statement on his part. I think it's a half apology, and I'm glad the panel's returning later. Because